It should be live. Hello. Sorry about the delay. We were having some technical difficulties. This is new, but we are here. So welcome.
Yes.
Welcome to Hades.
Okay.
My name is Brandy.
And I'm Jan.
And just wanted to, before we start this broadcast, we just want to put a disclaimer out there. Some of the information that we will be discussing tonight will be rather sensitive. It may be offensive to some, and we hope not. But we want to just put a disclaimer out now that be mindful that this may be offensive to some because the topic is sensitive that we want to talk about, and it may affect some. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you for tuning in, and let's talk.
All right. Awesome.
Go ahead.
All right. So I know here recently we did our first broadcast. And again, thank you for all who tuned in. Thank you for those who are tuned in now.
Yes.
We greatly appreciate your support.
Yes.
We talked a lot about grief on the week before last or 2 weeks ago. Time is moving, you guys.
It's moving.
So whenever it was that we had our last. It was
the 11th.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
So we talked about grief and the different things we went through as single widows or being single again.
Yes.
And widows and young business women as well as mothers and students. And so we here lately, I know we're near the holidays, and we know that around this time of year, grief is a heavy thing that people talk about. People are concerned. This is their first time going through a holiday without their loved ones. And so we want to provide some resource and tips for you all today to help you out, to help you to begin to move forward. I know we kind of ended our last session and we said we were going to open up and tell you how we overcame.
That's right.
So we're going to look at another side of grief on today. And I promise you, it won't be dull. It won't be boring.
Not at all.
Yes, because we're not dull and boring people.
Not at all.
So you don't have to worry. It won't be an overly heavy show.
Right.
But we do want to touch on those points and those things that's going to make your life better and give you practical tips on how to move forward. Because a lot of times I know, even being in a church background, people say, oh, you need to get over it. God is good. And some of the things we say, but still people need to have time to process.
That's right.
And there is a practical way to process things as well, too.
Yes, it is.
So we're going to talk on some of those things because we know a lot of times people have a skewed view of grief and how to handle it. And definitely know that we are not here to tell you get over it quick. Because grief is personal.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it depends on that person and you have to be an active participant in your healing process. So we want to be able to provide some helpful tools and tips that may be able to help you all in the meantime.
That's right.
And Brandy, I know you had noticed a few things here lately yourself.
Yes. I know the biggest thing that I had seen, some of my friends on Facebook, there was one, she had put several posts about grief and things of that nature. And when she put them posts about grief, they caught my attention. And she had a lot of people replying to them because of some of the things that we say from being unlearned. And from not having the proper education when it comes to grief, or people grieving, or people going through grief, or people how they're handling grief. And I commented on a few of the posts, and I found it to be important because one thing that really stood out to me is how a lot of people that's in the body of Christ, a lot of people that's in ministry, in church, go to church, believe in God. Sometimes we could be the worst people when it comes to sharing on how people should handle grief. You want to quote every scripture. You want to tell them what thus saith the Lord. You want to tell them that this is God's will. This is God's plan. That's not what people want to hear. Mainly when you're going through grief, you're on the verge of being cussed out. That's what's taking place. Because we got to be mindful of that. I mean, we come to people and we tell them every scripture that comes to mind. Oh, weeping may endure for a night, but joy gonna cometh in the morning. If a person is grieving and they're going through, do you really think they want you to preach to them? Do you really think they want you to teach them or give them our what cliches? we as a people, when I say we, I'm talking about all nationalities. I'm talking about all people, whether you're in church or out of church. We got to be mindful.
Yeah.
Of the words that we say to people, because we cannot preach to people when they're not in their season or in the mood or in their right mindset to be preached to, because then you're gonna push people away. They're not gonna want to hear what we have to say. We have to be mindful of that. We can't tell people when to grieve, how long to grieve, when to come out of grief, when grief is gonna end. That's not your place. Go ahead.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I think, like you said, it comes from being unlearned in certain things. And I know specifically because I had to learn this personally, because I would always be, want to be there, have the right words to say to people, to encourage them, to build them up, because we have to remember too, even in our grief, they're not necessarily, like you said, they're not needing those words.
No, they're not.
Sometimes they just need you to be there and listen. And sometimes we are, as people who are outside observing, sometimes we want to give that to people. We want to help them as much as we can. And sometimes the best way to help people is just by listening to them.
That's it.
I recall an event I had, after I had lost Steve, another friend of mine lost her spouse, and we went to visit her home and sat with her. And the other individual that traveled with me was a family member. And they just had all these questions. Well, how did they die? And how did this and that? And I could tell that wasn't the time nor the place to be asking those things. And I know different generations process things differently, because we want to know. And I've heard it said, well, thank God it was a natural death and not a traumatic. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's a death. Yeah, it still hurts.
Yes.
And I just got up and I kept feeling, I'm like, I don't have any words for this person. And I felt, well, maybe what this person needs is for me to just, sit with them and cry with them.
That's it.
And for those who know me personally, or even those who don't know me personally, I'm not a big crier in front of people. I don't. I'm one of those private, them closet criers, undercover. So I went over to this person, and I just sat next to them. And I, wrapped my arm around them and just laid their head on my shoulder. And I just began to weep, and they broke down and cried. And that's all they needed at that time and that moment. But I think that comes with, not only going through our own grief, but being mindful that we are human. Because I know sometimes we can come hard on people, but that we have to remember, sometimes people are doing the best that they know to do in that moment. Some are not intentionally trying to hurt us. Some are genuinely trying to do their best, and they don't know how. So the same grace that we want extended to us during our times of grief, we've got to be willing to extend that extend that grace to them also, because they're imperfect. I know like I said, there's been times I've said some stuff and I'm like, oh my God, I probably shouldn't have said that. They didn't need to hear that this time.
That's right.
So my time of grief, I will tell you, a woman of God, one of my mentors from the past, actually really said something that really kind of set me up for success in grieving. And it may sound strange, it may sound harsh for a minute, but if you listen to me, and I pray that you be able to receive the wisdom of what she said also. And she simply told me, she said, Jan, okay, I want you to listen. While you're going through this, I want you to know that, she said, don't be upset when we're here for you right now, and we want to cheer you on and be your supporters, but don't be upset when we go on with our lives. And that thing struck me, and I didn't get it then.
That's key.
But it caught up with me later, because sometimes we get mad because people have moved on. They moved on in their journey, they're moved on in their walk, and we're still processing. And we're wanting other people to process still with us, and that's not fair to people.
It is not.
It's not fair.
It is not.
So we have to be willing to let them let people off the hook.
That's right.
And know that they are human, and remember that we too have made mistakes in saying the wrong things at wrong times. Whether you're in the church, whether you're outside the church. Do we need to learn how to do things better? Absolutely. That's inside the church as well as outside. We could all learn. We're all striving to be better people, to learn. And that's the thing, we just have to be willing to learn.
That's right. That's right. I think the thing that really get us, when I remember when my late spouse passed, and all the people that were giving words of encouragement or giving comments or saying different things, I didn't want to hear any of that.
Yeah.
I really did not.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to hear what they had to say. It was more of those people that came and sat in my home with me, the ones I allowed in my home, and they sat in silence. And they just sat with me.
Yes.
And I put something on the TV and they watched the movie with me, and we didn't even talk. We just sat in each other's fellowship, and there was silence. That spoke volumes to me.
Yes.
Not all them words that people were saying, not all the prayers that people kept telling me they were praying for me. I appreciate it. But at that time, I was trying to process what it was that I was dealing with.
Yes.
Sometimes we need time to process. We don't need to be preached to. We don't need to be hit with every scripture you can think of. We need time to process.
Yes.
We don't need you to tell us that it was God's will that they're leaving or that they're gone. Yeah. It may be God's will, but we need time to process whether you're in church or not in the church. And a lot of times the church, we take the hit. We take the attacks, you know, them church folks, them holier than thou folks, you know, they want to be so heavenly minded. They're no earthly good. It's not that we mean bad. We mean well. It's just not all of us are educated enough to know how to respond to when you're going through grief. It's a process. Yes. And if we just give each other the benefit of the doubt, we wouldn't be so offended and become so angry and ready to cuss somebody out because we said the wrong thing at that time.
Yeah, and that's part of because we know there's several steps that you go through. There's denial, there's anger, there's relief.
Yes,
you know, when you go through grief. So grief is it's like, I know they always use the term, and I hate to use it because it's almost become cliche. But they said it's like a tide or a wave because it comes and it goes, it ebbs and it flows. So one day you're up, one day you're down, and it is true. Yes. But we also, you know, have to learn how to manage those emotions, and sometimes that may mean, again, going to therapy, going to see someone, asking for help, you know, through those times, and being able to have that close-knit individual who can maybe come and say something to you. But also, we also have to know that we can have outside resources because sometimes, you know, the truth of the matter is sometimes people get tired. I know that sounds rough, but sometimes they don't want to hear the story again. Sometimes we get tired of hearing the stories. I had to learn myself. I'm like, okay, I really need to stay, you know, keep moving forward, because I thought about it and I said, well, you know, and my thing with grief, when I went through after losing Steve, you know, I was the flip side. I had seen so many people that seemed like they were stuck in grief that I made up I'm like, okay, I do not want to be labeled a widow forever. No. I also do not want to, I don't want to be that stuck. Person who's, that stuck for years talking about 20 years later and I'm still depressed. And I know, you know, wisdom teaches us that weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And that joy comes when you decide to end your mourning. And I think sometimes we're waiting for God to end the mourning, and there's a process of place that we have to go through healing. That's right. But it's almost like when the man at the side of the pool, was it Bethesda? He said, will thou be made whole? Do you want to get well?
Do you want to get well?
And we have to determine too in ourselves. There's the Ecclesiastics teaches us that there is a time and a season for everything. There's a time to weep and there's a time to refrain from weeping. And so when we go through grief, it's not to be for the rest of our lives.
No, it is not.
And it would not even do it doesn't do justice to our loved ones that are behind. Not. They would be devastated if they knew the level of that we were still holding on. Not that they wouldn't miss us.
That's right.
But the fact that they would like for us to you know, they would want us to move forward with our lives.
That's right.
And, you know, so we want, and that's how we show honor to them by moving forward. You know, it's not, and when you move forward, it does not mean that you've forgotten them.
That's the key right there. Because I think a lot of times what happened, people don't understand when people are going through that season of grief, no matter how long your season lasts, when people are going through that season of grief, it is a season. Now, my season and your season, it changes. Seasons change. They do not remain the same. And just because that person have decided to move on, do not mean they have forgotten their loved one. You will never forget your loved one because they were a part of you.
Yes.
That you will never forget them, but you have to move on. It is either life or death. You're going to live or you're going to die. There is no in between.
Yes.
An in-between person is unstable, and a double-minded person is unstable in all their ways. So either you're going to live or you're going to die. You have to make up your mind. We cannot get stuck because someone else is stuck. We can help you. Yes. We can support you. We can encourage you. But at the end of the day, the choice is yours. Either you're going to move forward or you're not. It's your choice. And I mean, go ahead, but it's your choice.
I mean, that's so true, ultimately, and you can stay in grief as long as you need to. We're not telling anybody rush through grief, get over it, but because if you don't deal with grief, it will deal with you.
It will.
So you do have to allow yourself time to process and time to allow yourself have those moments. I would tell someone in a heartbeat, scream if you need to, yell, knock something over. I remember the first time, and this may sound strange to some, but there was a little bit of friction between me and my ex-family, ex-in-laws, or I don't call them ex anymore because thank God has reconciled things. But there was a tiff between us after Steve passed. And so I had a memorial service for Steve here in the city for our church family and so forth. And but there was a separate funeral for him in his hometown of Arkansas. And yes, absolutely.
We sure can.
And we he was buried in Arkansas, but I did not attend his funeral. Now, I know some people may say, oh my God, that's horrible. Why wouldn't you attend your husband's own funeral? Because I did not attend the physical funeral because at that time, again, there was so much friction. It would not have been wise for us to attend it. Nobody was scared, but we just wanted to make sure there was no additional, issues later on. And so, it was probably 3 or 4 months later that I actually went and saw his grave after he had passed away. And when I got there in Arkansas, it shocked me. I mean, it just kind of caught me off it just caught me off guard. And I said, oh my God, I was trying to set flowers and everything in me wanted to dig him up out of that ground and take him home with me. And God let me know that's what I was protecting you from. Now you thought, because at that time there were some altercations going on. They're going to transport his body out of the state without letting me know. But God revealed that to the funeral home director that I had set in place here. That she said something told me to look at the papers one more time. And when she double checked the papers, that's when she saw that I was the next of kin, but they were trying to move his body out overnight before I knew it.
So make sure they understand what you're saying before we deal with the spirit of grief. And we want to thank everyone for tuning in. We truly are thankful for you tuning in. Please please share, please subscribe and follow. But if you listen to what Sister's saying, they're basically going back and forth over the body.
Yes.
And now you've lost your loved one, and now we're having a disagreement over the body.
Yeah.
Think about the psychological damage of that. Go ahead.
Yes. And I, and this is where it really pays to have the Spirit of God. Because I when I first heard about it, I was super angry. And I had to choke it back. And at that point in time, I'm like, okay, the gloves are off. I'm done being nice, but I thank God for the spirit of wisdom, as Sister Gail just stated, the spirit of wisdom. Because the Spirit of God reminded me, the first thing he reminded me of was something a preacher that I grew up under, a pastor, actually, Elder James L. Sanders used to say all the time. Now, we hear him as a kid. He said, it doesn't take power to talk. It takes power to shut your mouth sometimes. And that thing now, and I'm, the Lord, I was kind of lit. So the Lord, one strike don't do for me. So he had to hit me again. And then he said, stand still and see the salvation of God, the Lord. Because these enemies that you see today, you will not have to deal with them no more.
No more.
And then I'm like, okay, God, but still, then the final one that shut me down, he told me, in quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. And he said, and I need to trust you. And I agree.
Why do explain that?
Why do it have such
talked about that?
Yeah, disagreements. And I'm not, and I think it's because of misunderstanding.
It is.
And that's the thing too. We've got to, because grief brings out the the worst in us.
Grief brings out what's within a man's heart.
Yes.
That's what grief do. It
Yes.
bring out what's within your heart, the things that you've been harboring, the things that you don't say when they were living and going through, all those emotions that we have kept within. As soon as they leave, all hell breaks loose. Well, Hades, let's talk about it, because that's what happened, overseer. We hold on to so much while the process is taking place. You have unanswered questions. No one wants to really be honest and open and talk about things because of the afraid of, I'm going to offend somebody, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. Well, guess what? As soon as that person passed, the person that's left trying to deal with their loved one gone, that person that was right there with them, intimate, you don't understand the damage that they cause to that person when all of that attack come up on them and they're already going through emotionally. Go ahead.
I love how she just preaches us and then says, oh, go ahead. But that is so true, you know, and it doesn't have to be that way.
That's right.
I think it's a choice, and I believe it deals with, like you said, the relationship before the passing, the relationship that you've already had and established. That's right. And then in the midst of it, that grieving process, their emotions are everywhere. People are just kind of, and that's why we have to make sure that we are taking that time to deal with us and deal with ourselves, because even after that, I had to go through a season of forgiveness. I had to go back and make sure I had to forgive.
I did too.
Because I cannot tell you, I was, joy. God gave me the strength to praise and worship God like nobody's business at the service. But afterwards, I came off that cloud. And that hit me, and it's like, okay, we could have done this decent in order.
We could have communicated if we would have communicated.
But there's another thing, we don't communicate. And we have to be willing and courageous enough to have those courageous conversations where it's uncomfortable at sometimes, but that's how you get to the root of things. And I, you know, and I would have been, you know, I was happy to talk, but it was a whole different situation. But anyway, God had to help me to go back and forgive. Because I was mad for a reason. And I was going afterwards. I kept going, you know, after I literally, like I said, last time I started a new job, literally 2 months after I buried my husband, I was buying a house, I was moving things, but God stopped me. And he said, you cannot keep going forward looking backwards.
You cannot.
And what he meant by that is you may have an appearance of moving forward, but if your heart and your mind is still stuck in the past of the hurt, the pain, you know, you are really not moving forward. So I had to go back and I had to have a conversation, you know, with my in-laws and say, you know, and was honest. Hey, I did not like what you did. You could have talked to me, and they expressed to me, I did not like how you handle things. And I had to look at where I was missing things too, because that's one thing. Even as believers, we have to remember everybody's not on the same level of faith that you are. And some people may not believe at all. And it's how we respond. And I know when Steve was in the hospital, I would tell him, I said, you know, I talked to his mom. I remember she called me and I was like, oh, you know, God's going to bring him out. We're believing God. We're trusting God. And, you know, my faith was up here because God literally felt like he was carrying me, and he was. And she was like, well, I don't know. And, you know, and I was trying to get her on my page, but when I hung up, we do. Because when I hung up, I was convicted. And it was like, well, no, you know, at the end of the day, this is still her son.
Yes, it is.
And that's your husband. And yes, you two are joined together and you're one flesh. So there's a difference between the level of grief that she has versus you, but that's her son.
That's right.
And what really made it solid for me is when I went to a grief counseling session, and I met a young lady, or she was a young mother. Excuse me, I had lost her. I think her son was 20 something years old to gun violence. And she said something that forever changed my perspective in my life. She said, when my son died, she said, it was like, she said, my womb cried. And when she said that, it was like I felt my own womb. There's a grief that a mother has that's different than a spouse has, and that does not take away from either one's grief. Everyone has their own special type of grief, because we were one. Like I didn't share this last time, but when Steve passed, you know, after I left the hospital, because I was there when he took his last breath, I was standing right beside him, and I saw him when he took his last breath. And when I left the hospital, I went to bed that night and I told the Lord, I said, I'm okay with not waking up in the morning. And I wasn't suicidal. I wasn't
Right.
depressed.
Right.
It just felt like
Right.
when he left, a part of me left,
Yes.
because there was that severing, because now we were no longer one, because he
Right.
had departed. And it
Right.
was such a weird, it was such a surreal feeling. But at the same time, so a spouse's grief is different than a mother's.
Yes, it
So
is.
God had to have me come back and recognize, don't expect her to
No.
be at the level of peace and
No.
acceptance that you are,
No.
because that is his mom. And I had to go back and I had to apologize to her.
That's
I had to
right.
humble myself
That's
and
right.
ask her forgiveness and ask her, forgive me for not seeing it in
That's
that
right.
way.
That's
And
right.
she turned around and asked me for forgiveness.
Yes.
And we got things together. Because at the end of the day, that was my baby girl's biological grandmother.
That's right.
And so I wanted her to still have a peace with her. And I'm glad we made that reconciliation, because my mother-in-law
That's
and my
right.
father-in-law actually both passed away
They
this
did.
past October.
Yes.
They passed, but we had another good conversation just to
Right.
make sure the air was clear between
Right.
us. And we have forgiven each other. We told each
Yes.
other we loved each other. And we were able to have that conversation and make full peace
Mhm.
before they passed
That's
on.
right.
And
That's
so
right.
it helped, that
That's
just
right.
really helped us to look things differently, because we had to take time, communicate, have
Love
those
you
tough
too.
conversations,
Love you
and
too.
forgive.
Yes.
That is if
Yes.
you want to
Yes.
really heal from your grief,
Yes.
you
You
have to
have
forgive.
to.
And it's not
Yes.
only just
Yes.
forgiving, you have to forgive those who don't have the proper words.
Exactly.
You even have to forgive sometimes your spouse or
Yeah.
that person that's left.
Yes.
Because sometimes I know one individual, her spouse left. She had been warning him, take care of your health, take care of your health, and he blew it off. So she dealt with anger.
Yeah.
Because she was angry because
Yes.
now, you left me because you
Right.
didn't
Because
do
you
what
didn't listen.
we have
That's
to
right.
deal with
That's
grief
right.
and our
That's
anger,
right.
even in forgiveness
That's right.
towards God.
That's right.
And I know we don't like to talk about, well, I shouldn't be saying I don't forgive God. No, tell him.
Yes.
Ask
Tell
God.
him.
Because God listens
That's
to us.
right.
He says he is near to the brokenhearted.
Right.
But if we never open up and tell God, my
Right.
heart is
That's
broken.
right. Yes.
And I'm struggling. And I did go through a place where when I was driving to and I'm gonna let you hop in here because I feel like I'm dominating the conversation.
Go ahead. Have your way.
But when I was driving, I had that moment. I was pushing, and then my mom said, "Well, I can watch your girls go to this Joyce Meyer conference." And I took a trip by myself, drove to St. Louis that year by myself, and it seemed like as I'm driving to St. Louis, there's a sign up. If you're on 55 North, you'll see Chicago, and then it says Memphis on the other side. Yeah. And because I've always driven the Memphis way, 55 South, to go down there to see Steve's grave, when I saw that, I broke in the middle of traffic driving. I screamed and I cried and I hollered and I look, and it's kind of funny. It's not funny, but it is funny because I slapped my
the
steering wheel.
Oh yeah, no,
and
I hit the dashboard.
Girl, I slapped the steering wheel. Then I had a what's it called? Epiphany. I said, wait a minute.
I'm driving.
Not only that, the airbag is in the. I said, no. And I got tickled. I had to laugh at myself because I'm like, well, I don't like explosive things.
Right.
I said, Lord, when I leave here, I don't want to. Yes. I said, Lord, I have to. I want to leave here quietly. I don't have to have any dramatic exits. I'm good, Lord. So
that's good.
And
that's
yes,
good.
forgive yourself for your own thoughts. Yes. Yes, and that is so good. We have to forgive ourselves too.
Yes.
And when I had that moment, I screamed, and I had my own hotel. I stayed over at St. Louis, got me a hotel. Then I drove down to Memphis, visited his grave, got me a hotel in Memphis, had a great time. But I sat in the room and I cried, and I played a movie, and I sat there by myself, and I began to ask God the hard questions. Why, God? Why did he have to die like this? Why did it happen? Why right now? Just in the height when our marriage seems like it's just now getting to that place, because in those first few years, you're still getting to become one.
Right,
and now when we feel like we've got a groove, the ministry is going well, and we've got a new baby, now he's going. I asked all of those questions.
Right.
And I didn't feel condemnation. I didn't feel judgment. I cried, and I felt like the Lord answered me. Now he didn't answer me the way I wanted to hear. I didn't get the answers I wanted to hear. And that's the key thing. Sometimes I don't need necessarily an answer from God. I just need to know that he heard me.
That's it.
And sometimes that's all you need is to be heard.
That's it.
And I said, God, I need you to hear me because my heart is broken,
That's right.
and I let it out and I wept and I cried, and I needed that moment.
That's
And
right.
sometimes we have to honor ourselves, be patient with ourselves,
That's right.
show grace to yourself, forgive yourself, because yes, those thoughts will come. You will go through anger and say, well, what in the world, Jesus?
That indeed.
And I sure told him, I said, well, Lord, and you would hear people, oh, God's going to use this for your glory, for your ministry. Well, I don't want that ministry. Why do I have to be the one? I don't want that one. That's not the ministry I want.
Right.
But God used that. And when we talk about moving forward, and I'm going to let you go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of Steve being in the hospital, you have to shut me down. But in the midst of the hospital, while Steve was still, before he had passed, it was revealed to me what my purpose was. I plainly hear, while I was listening to the nurse telling us what our next steps were, I heard plainly, Jan, you need to go back into healthcare so you can help people who have gone through this other journey, just like you. That's right. And I'm like, my first thought was like, Lord, please tell me you're not asking me to be a nurse, because that is not it. Because I had learned how to clean out his bed wounds. I had learned to turn him. I was training the nurses how to do the quad assist diaphragm push to help, expel his fluids when he had to suction out his trach, and I had to suction it out. So I learned a lot of things, and I'm like, I almost passed out, girl, one day when they tried to teach me how to replace a catheter. And I don't know, and I've never passed out in my life, but and I guess because I hadn't eaten breakfast that morning, I wasn't ready, y'all. And that nurse came in, she's like, well, you gotta, I'm like, ma'am, I'm like, seriously, I need you to stop, like right now, because, and Steve just kind of looked at me like, oh my God, Jan. I'm like, no. I'm like, maybe you're not feeling it because you're paralyzed, but I'm feeling it for you because we are one, and I cannot watch this.
Yes. I know. I was just reading over your comments. I'm loving the interaction here, and we are acknowledging them. I know the First Lady, Gail Reeves, had asked, could we deal with the spirit of grief? And when it comes to dealing with the spirit of grief, a lot of times that spirit of grief deals with individuals that they get stuck. They're not ready to move forward. Sometimes pain is the only thing you have that's connecting you to the loved one that is gone.
That's good.
Pain is the only thing connecting you to the loved one that's gone. So because of that, you end up with the spirit of grief, not just dealing with conventional grief. You'd already made it through anticipatory grief. You'd already made it through preparatory grief. And now you're in that conventional grief. But now it's a heart issue. And you got to get past the heart issue, because if we don't make it past that heart issue, what happens is we end up with this condition called it's called acute stress disorder, but it's also called stress cardiomyopathy. Have you ever heard of a person with a broken heart syndrome? That's what that is. Broken heart syndrome. And that's because something acute have happened. Something that's so great in emotion have traumatized you to the point you go into acute distress disorder, not post-traumatic stress disorder, acute stress disorder. And now that heart becomes damaged. And this can be short term. Now, depending on how long it takes you to move through that season, you might want to seek medical advice because the heart is going through a lot. The heart is dealing with a lot. So between grief and natural stress connected together, it will cause you health problems.
Yes, it will.
Grief can kill you. Now, I know we gave the disclaimer at the beginning. This is very sensitive conversation, but it's needed conversation. We see we got some new comments. We're going to come down here so that we can get them showing. Yes, it's just basically what's happening. Yes, your mother-in-law had that. Yes, it's real. And a lot of times we don't deal with things, but this is real.
It is.
I mean, broken heart syndrome is real. You get enough heartache and enough pain and enough issues in life that come at you fast. The heart can only deal with so much. The heart is only a muscle. Take your fist, take it this way and lay it down. That's about as big as your heart is. The heart is only a muscle. Muscles break down. And we can also build them. So there's things we can do to help them muscles in this body, which is that heart. And I looked at that because I said, I just wanted to break it down. If Acute stress disorder, that is something that is diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Acute stress disorder, we're talking about something that's traumatic. It kicks in within 4 weeks of time. I'm not talking about that longer term dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. This is when you need to see a therapist. You need to see a psychiatrist. You need to get some medical help. You need to go see your medical physician. Stress is real. Grief is real, and it will take your life if you stay in it beyond help. And when I say beyond help, what I'm talking about, we're trying to make sure we can see these. Yes, your daughter had it. Yes. And it could have taken her out. You're right. But God. And that's what we got to start sharing this stuff with people. You know, when I was going through preparatory grief, anticipatory grief, and then conventional grief hit, when I went through all of them, I was exercising something intense. I was jogging, I was running, I was hill climbing, I was boxing, you name it, I was doing it. I mean, I have a gym in my home, but I was hitting outside. I was doing 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 miles in a day because I was making sure therapeutically that I was staying in my right mind and that I was taking care of my whole holistic self, not just one part of myself, the whole holistic self. And that's what we have to do now. We have to go ahead.
No, that's so good. No, you could have kept on because we do. And I think that's, again, going back, we're spiritual beings, but we're in the natural body. So we have to learn how to take care. We have to educate ourselves on how to take care of the natural and the spiritual. Matter of fact, the word teaches us is first natural, then spiritual. And sometimes there's, of course, we believe in the power of prayer. Absolutely. Both of us, we are praying women. We prayed all through our spouse's situation. We've seen people, we were talking about the other night, we've been praying laid around people's beds in their homes who had cancer, and these people are still alive today. So we've seen God work through us. But at the same time, we also believe in the power of going to see your doctors because God can work through the doctors. He can work through the medication.
With that prayer piece, I seen someone ask about prayer and they had concerns about it. And I just want to share, prayer is to help the individual. Now, prayer is not so much that it may always change the circumstances. And we have to remember that. Not everything we pray for is going to come to pass.
Well, say that.
It's going to be a yes, a no, not right now. And that's just part of life. It's same with us as natural parents. We're not going to say yes to everything our children ask for. We will say no sometime, and we will say not right now. And guess what? Sometimes it's just a flat out, we're just ignoring you. I mean, seriously. And I mean, I don't want to sound mean, but sometimes we're asking for things in the wrong season and at the wrong time. Some things, if we get it when we ask for it, it may just destroy us. So we have to be careful what we're asking for. And a lot of times when we're praying and we're asking God for something and it do not get answered, then you start to question your faith. There are so many different levels of faith. And that's not what we're about to talk about. But what I just want to get you to understand, just because your answer is not yes, do not mean that God don't exist.
Say, girl.
Just because you don't get a yes, just because you don't get a right now answer. You know, the biggest thing that I had to deal with was when I got hurt during the funeral service. When I see how some of the flow went and how some people reacted in their faces, and you're reading their body language and things of that nature, that affected me mentally. Because a lot of times it's not the enemies that give you hell. It's not the frenemies that give you hell. It's the church folks that give us the most hell in situations that are stressful because we fail to communicate properly. And I gotta put it out there. Hey, you might not like me, but it's us. It's us church folks that got to do better because we are the main people that can cause the most racket. And then we sitting up wanting to preach, teach and prophesy to somebody. Come on now, y'all, we got to do better. Why do you think the world is in the shape that it's in? Because a lot of them don't want to deal with us church folks. It's our children, it's our grandchildren, it's our own family. Come on now. I mean, it's something. We're living in a time right now that we got so many people that are hurting. They don't want nothing to do with God. They don't want nothing to do with their parents' God, because I've heard that. And where we gotta understand, we are still human.
Yes.
Regardless of what our title is, regardless of if we're in the church or not in the church, we are human. And we have to know when to shift. We got to know when to turn. And we got to understand there's a time for everything. We cannot always preach to individuals when they're going through certain seasons, because it may not be received. He have to help us. We can be the worst people, because I say the thing that get me, if I'm already going through and if I'm already hurting, you would think that my enemies, they're okay with that. They sit back and they laughing. Oh yeah, they going through. But it's the ones that break bread with you. It's the ones that are your brothers and your sisters that hurt the worst. Those hurts are those hurts that you have to get deliverance from. You have to be delivered. What do you mean, Brandy? Let me explain. In order to get delivered from something, you got to be willing to deal with it. You cannot hide. You cannot ignore a situation and think it's going to change.
So true.
I mean, I got to the point to where I said, I not only need forgiveness to move on in life, but I need forgiveness because I will not be bound by anyone.
No.
I will not be held bound nor captured, and I will not become stagnated because of unforgiveness. Go ahead.
You did it again. But that is so true. You know, like you said, and yes, absolutely, the Holy Spirit has to help us as believers. And for those who don't have the Holy Spirit, you still have to be willing to reach out. And you know, there is a lot of hurt that comes across. But I will say this too. I want to add to this because I know, that was part of the reason too. Even when we had the memorial service for Steve, you know, I told the minister of music rather. I said, when you go in here, I said, I want you all to praise God like it's nobody's business.
That's right.
I said, because in the back of my mind, I said, I never want people coming in to doubt my God because they knew some of Steve's story that he said he had work to do and he wasn't going to leave here. Now, here we are at a memorial because he's no longer here. So what happened? And I think that's the evangelist in me. I'm always thinking about people's souls and how they're going to be impacted by the things, how we respond. And so I said, no, I said, you go in there, and it wasn't a show. It wasn't a fashion. It was but the Spirit of the Lord really was genuinely carrying me. Because I wanted people, and of course, at the end of the day, we can't make anybody believe God.
You cannot.
But we can live a life that makes people thirsty and hungry to know more about our God. And that's how, like you said, we process our grief, not only spiritually, but intellectually, intelligently. We got to learn how to heal intelligently, heal spiritually. Because again, like you said, we try to over spiritualize some things that we need to go see our doctors. We need to call our therapists. We need to have somebody who can tell me, set me up for tools, if not for anything else. Because you're right, as the body of believers, we do. That's why it is so imperative that we cannot be boxed into the church.
No, we cannot.
The saints are needed everywhere. We're needed in every domain and every sphere of its influence. We need to be in the hospitals as doctors, nurses, lawyers, therapists, counselors. Yes, we need to be out there. We need to be in government. We need to be in the White House. We need to be in every facet of society. And but I don't want to drive too much into that because I know we're still talking about grief. But it's just, I will say,
but with grief is part of life.
Yes, it is.
It's part of the cycle because death is a part of life. We all are going to leave one day, but we must learn to live.
Yes.
Enjoy life. We have to live. I think the biggest thing is how you move and how you get
Yes.
to the next place.
Yes.
How do I get there? What do I do?
Mhm.
How do I surround myself with positive people? How do
Yes.
I surround myself with good people, good communication, people that their spirits will help encourage me, people
Mhm.
that will lift me up and help me so
Yes.
that I don't have to battle psychologically in
Mhm.
this season. This season used to be one of the happiest seasons for many people. I've been looking at Facebook and I've been going through some of them posts. There's so many people that right now are
Mhm.
just wanting this season to pass over.
Yeah.
That touches my heart. It,
Yeah.
it grieves me to where I'm praying for people because you don't want to see anyone to the point to where their hearts are heavy.
Yes. And can I add
Yeah,
to
go
that too?
ahead.
Because sometimes when you talked about having that support system and that support group, which
Yes.
is vital to
Yes.
your healing process, the healthy people, the right people around you,
Yes. Yes.
sometimes they may ask you to do something that's inconvenient. And it may feel weird at the moment. And because
Yes.
I know even while Steve was in the hospital and even
Mhm,
after he
mhm.
passed,
Yes.
my mentor was like, no, you still need to get up and you need to teach Sunday school.
That's
You need to
right.
still go and do.
That's
And I
right.
did. I continued in ministry. He was on his
Yes.
deathbed and I was still doing
Yes.
ministry. I was still
Yes.
out preaching to others.
Yes.
And you know what? That helped me because that
That's
helped me
right.
because I had to keep a source of normal sense of normalcy for my
Normalcy.
children and even
Yes.
for myself to
Yes.
keep things flowing. It wasn't that I was neglecting his needs because
No.
again, like I said, I was there 24/7. They didn't know when I was
Yes.
coming to the hospital.
Yes.
But at the same time, keeping that level of balance
Yes.
helped me to maintain, help me to move forward. So then I wasn't devastated by the loss.
That's right.
It hurt. I went
That's
through the
right.
grief, but at least I had that support system that
That's
said, hey,
right.
Jan, we know you're still grieving, but we still need, would you be able to do this?
Right.
And then there came a point in time where I did have to say time out. I have been moving forward. I just need a break too.
That's
And
right.
it's okay to ask for
It
a break.
is.
I need
It
to step
is.
down from ministry, give me a moment so I can gather myself and make sure I am healing
That's
properly.
right.
Because sometimes we could use people because we see the gifting in them or because we need the people in position, but people need time to process.
Yes.
And then when you see them going too long, it's okay to ask them.
Yes.
So don't be offended if people ask you to do things to continue because they're trying to help you the best they can. And that was some of the
Yes.
best
Yes.
advice because if I wasn't busy, I would have been sitting in a
That's
slump. I
right.
would have been
That's
depressed.
right. That's right.
I would have been
Right.
upset.
So
And
you're basically telling them you have to find some normalcy
Yes.
when it's not normal.
Yes.
You have to yet push
Mhm.
when you don't want to. You take that time off, but at the same time, you have to yet get up,
Yes.
take a bath, take a
Yes.
shower,
Yes.
comb your hair.
Yes. One step at a time.
You have to keep yourself going
Mhm.
because somebody is depending on you. And I used to tell myself that all the time, and that gave me strength.
Mhm.
Somebody is depending on me. Somebody
Yes.
needs me.
Mhm.
Come on, Brandy. You can do this. We talk to ourselves
Yeah.
anyway.
Yes.
So
look, I was going to say, and I love that people do need us. Well,
yes,
we need us.
we
And
need
sometimes
us.
we have to
Yes.
honor our feelings, and it's okay
Woo.
not to be okay.
Yes,
there are
it
moments
is.
it's okay to have a moment.
Yes,
But for me, it's not okay to stay unokay.
exactly.
I know that's probably I just made up a word, but
it's okay. It was some little ebonics, but
Yeah,
y'all get
yeah.
what we're saying, right?
Yeah, we're both educated.
But okay. But I remember when I was out working out at the track once.
Mhm.
And we're getting ready to do a little shift here and talk
Mhm.
about something a little different here in a
Oh,
moment
yes.
because I know people got some questions about dating and how you move forward and all that good stuff.
All that.
Yeah,
Bring it
give
up.
us the questions so we can talk about it. But I remember when I was out working out and I'm out here on this track and I'm running and I'm jogging. I got this music playing. I'm dancing and everything. And I just started screaming. Literally, I was just screaming. And, people kind of looking at me or what? And I kept screaming.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
they like, what is wrong with her? But sometimes you have to let it out.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes you just got to let it out. Just let go. Sometimes you just, a person's dancing, let them dance.
Yes.
Let them dance because dancing is a form of exercise. Let them dance.
Yes.
If that's what gets them, my mother was able to make it on. She was having technical difficulties. Well, hey.
Yeah.
And so when people are going through, and if it's dancing that gets them through, if it's exercising that get them through, when it's unhealthy, smoking, drinking, the drugs, the marijuana, whatever it may be. When it comes to things like that and it's unhealthy, then that's when you try to ask them, is there something you could do to help them? Because we're trying to help you live.
Yeah.
And we know there are side effects from everything.
Yes.
But if it's a natural high that they're doing, let's support them. If they want to go dance, go dance.
Yes.
If they want to go exercise, go exercise. If they want to go to a comedy show, go to a comedy show.
Absolutely.
We gotta be supportive. Laughter is just like a medicine.
Yes, it is.
So if you just want to laugh out loud in the midst of stress, start laughing.
Oh yeah.
Just start laughing.
See, but wasn't expecting that, and that's so true because it is, and I told you when I had my moment I screamed, I had to laugh at myself.
Yes,
you know, and it's okay to laugh at yourself. Yes, you know, don't take yourself so seriously. You have to, because it lifts you, and I think that's the burden. Yes, and it cleanses your soul, just like in crying. Don't deny yourself to cry. If you need to cry, get those toxins are released in your tears.
It's okay to look ugly for a minute.
Yes, and then go ahead and put yourself back together. Because I share even in the customer service training class that I teach, and I know we're ready to shift this real quick because Mom is on now. We got to get to some juicy stuff. But I used to, when I told you I worked for 2 months after Steve died, I'm going right back into healthcare. Yeah. And sometimes God will send you to the place that wounded you to be an impact. And I had to go back, and there were days I would go into work, tears would be streaming down my face, but I fixed my makeup. Yeah. And when I got in there, good morning. Thank you for calling IU Health. Thank you for sure. And nobody knew for probably over a year and a half before I ever told them that my husband had passed. Yeah. And they said, Jan, we never knew. Because the way you carried yourself and the way I carried myself actually helped me. So it was a blessing. And I know, I'm not sure what that is.
That's that tech.
Yeah, that's not sure. Somebody. We got a viewer on YouTube, so thank you for tuning in on YouTube.
Thank you.
Yes, so welcome. I know we want to kind of make a shift because
we wanted to shift because we know our first show, we dealt with a lot and we talked about a lot and we covered a lot of floor, a lot of ground there. But people had questions, and so now is the time to do your questions so that we can answer them to the best of our ability. Yes. And so ask your questions about dating and being widow and being single and the shift and how you move forward and what did you do to get to where you're going or what did it take for you. Share. This is now the time. The floor is open, and we'll reply to your questions.
Yes. All right. And don't be scared.
Yeah, come on. Ask your questions. A lot of people said they had questions. So now we've opened up the floor for you to ask your questions. This is Hades. Yeah. Let's talk about this. And anybody that don't know what the word Hades means, there's a few definitions for it, but Hades means hell. Yeah. So our talk show is called Hell. Well, Hades. Yeah. So a lot of times when people are going through issues in life, naturally speaking, that's what you hear them say. You don't see them always say, oh my God, oh Jesus, Lord help us, oh Christ. Yeah. You don't hear that. Unless it's some people like us. But so let's talk about it. Hades is also underground world. So it's where a lot of stuff happened up underneath. You know, some of that stuff that's under the cover, some of that stuff that's under the rug.
You want to deal with it.
Let's deal with it. Let's talk about it. Now is the time. If you're grieving, ask your questions. How do we get to where we at? And a big thing is just because we're where we at, don't mean you have to be where we're at.
That's so good. Yes.
It do not.
Yes.
Just because I'm strong, do not mean you're as strong as I am. And I am not to push you or pull you. I am to be compassionate and have understanding until you get to where I am or until you get to your place that you're happy and you're at content with peace within. Yes.
I'm so glad you said that because we don't want anyone to feel like, oh, you got to be here overnight because it didn't take us overnight. I'm for almost 4 years now into my grief. So it takes time. but we want to let you know that you can come out of it.
That's
When you are ready, when you feel the process, again, I said at the beginning, you have to be an active participant in your healing.
Yes.
And so you know the time frame when you're ready to let it go.
That's
you know
right.
when you're ready to move forward.
That's right.
And like you said, we're going to answer some questions, but
Yes.
since I don't see any questions,
I don't see any questions either.
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
I got a question for you.
Oh, go for it.
Okay. So, we kind of on our little commercial, we were talking about dating and whatnot.
Yeah.
I want to get to that part. That part's good. Y'all pray my strength in the Lord. But dating. Okay.
Dating, yes.
So, once just being transparent,
Yes.
after Steve passed, I would hear different ones. It's okay to go ahead and take your ring off because you're no longer married. And this was like a month after.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, I
Mhm.
listened to them.
Mhm.
But as far as with
For me, divorce was like
it
death.
is, and it is.
No,
a death.
it is a death.
It is a death.
It's not like overseer. You're correct. It is a death. Any type of relationship that comes to an end is a death. Whether it's a mutual relationship, a business partner relationship, a co-worker relationship, employment, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife. When relationships end, it is a form of death because it is no more. It is finished. Now, that do not mean soul ties are not still connected. Because you can still have soul ties even though you're not with the person. So yeah, I just flipped the script. I really did. But overseer, we're gonna blame you for it. So because okay, you strong. Yes. So it says for me, divorce was like death. And I've been divorced before. I've been there. So I totally can relate to divorce being like a death, just like being a widow, because both of them came to an end.
Yeah.
Both of them did. Let's talk about it. The floor is open.
Yes. And that was so huge. Yeah, it is like a death. And so you have to go through that same grieving process. Yes, you do. Because it is like a death because you're severing, a covenant's been severed.
Yes.
And marriage is binding.
Yes, it
is. And you almost turned this thing totally upside down. You talked about soul ties. I thought about something. Therefore, dating still out of question. No, not at all.
No, because it is not.
No,
go on, girl.
Okay, hold on. Hold on.
Overseer got us going.
Yeah, because I'm going to take us to 1 Corinthians 7, because he tells us, he said, if the unbelieving spouse desires to depart, let them depart. And I'm not quoting it verbatim, but he says, you are free from that person.
Free.
So that means you are free to date again.
Free.
You're free to remarry again.
Free.
So that was an excellent question, because I know that has been a stronghold in the church for years, that we felt like, well, because I'm divorced, I can never be married again.
Not true.
That's not true.
Not true.
We don't have the proper understanding, because Paul explicitly states that if an unbelieving spouse desires to depart, let them depart. And he said, you are no longer bound to that person.
No, you're not.
So you are open and able to begin to date again.
Yes, you are.
And enjoy dating. And I think that's one thing too.
Well, let's flip that real quick. Flip that real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
When we start talking about dating now, are you dating with a purpose to where it's going to turn to courting? Because courting is when you're lining up for marriage. Dating, we just kicking it, is almost like dating. We're just getting information. We're just gathering data. And we're trying to get to know the person, but it's on a surface level. We want to get deeper than just surface level. We need to get to the next level. Go ahead.
But that was an excellent question.
Yes,
and great breakdown too, because we have to know that we're free, and even if there was a situation because of adultery,
that's right.
You're free to date again.
Yes, you are.
Because you're free from the individual, because that's one of the ones that God gave us permission, so to speak, to leave. It's not the only cause, because he said, and we know the Bible teaches that God hates divorce, but he allowed divorce, he told Moses, because of the hardness of the men's heart, because they were abusing the women, they were hurting the women, and God doesn't, and this is where we have to really understand the Bible, because
I have never dated since my divorce. Okay, we need to talk about that.
Yes.
When man decided to leave, you cannot keep anyone in a relationship. So when he decided to divorce you, he set you free.
Yes.
Whom the Son set free
is free indeed.
Now, you can try to rekindle that if it's one of them relationships that can be rekindled. But if not, you got the Bible. If you believe in the Bible and you stand on the word of God, and that's what you believe in, and that's what you're walking with, then read it, break it down into more than one translation, not just King James. You might have to look in the NIV and the American Standard, so that you, and say it again,
the AMC,
and the AMC, so that you can understand them line upon line, scripture upon scripture, precept upon precept, and concept upon concept, because you are free once they have let you go.
Yes.
You are not bound to stay single
for the rest of your
life. That is not biblical.
And that's the thing too. I think in the church, we treat divorce as a punishment to our people. And we talk about God being a God of love, but yet then we demonize people who want to love again. And we have to be so careful with that.
We do.
You know, that understand, because
tradition.
Yes, again, tradition. Because that's the thing too. I had an individual tell me after Steve passed, because they had lost their spouse. Well, you're gonna sit for a while, because it took me 5 years. I'm like, that's devil is a liar.
That's not true.
I'm like, first of all, there's an age difference. So and not that that's a big deal, but I have different needs at my age than you have I might have later on as I get older.
Right.
And not just about that.
But see, this is the thing. We got to talk about these things. Sex is part of marriage. Yes. Sex is part of a relationship, and it is what it is. Now, you can act as if that sex don't exist, and you might find yourself by yourself, because in a marriage, God did allow that to be part of the marriage union.
I'm gonna jump
Go
in.
ahead, girl.
I'm gonna jump in, because I learned, God is the one who created sex. It wasn't our idea.
It wasn't us.
It was his ideal. And it's not, and he did not make it just for procreation.
No.
He made it. He tells us over in Proverbs, what Solomon teaches us in the wisdom of the Proverbs.
Right now.
He said, let the man enjoy the wife of your youth, and let her breast satisfy you at all times. So, and we have, of course, the Song of Solomon's. That complete book is almost biblical erotica.
If you have never heard what true love is, and the essence and the deepness of love, go to the book of Solomon. Read the whole book of Solomon. Solomon is a bad book.
Yes. It is. And we have to know that we can move forward in that, because someone told me, oh, you're going to be single for 5 years. I'm like, the devil is a liar. No, I ain't. But we have to, but I think it's okay to date again when you feel you are ready to date again. You feel
you're ready.
When it's not based on a need and wanting somebody to be there to feel something.
Deborah, this is good, because tradition holds us hostage from dating after breakups.
Yes,
that's true, Deborah. And we're going to talk about it. Go on.
And not only that, hold on. Y'all done started something.
Okay.
Now you got to hit a sore spot.
We're going to talk about this one.
Because another tradition that we have that's stuck in the church, we tell people, and we wear this scripture out. We says, he that finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from God. Ooh. But yes, that is true.
It is true.
But that did not say that is the only way to find a husband. But we made it, and I've seen personally myself, women sitting in church waiting on a husband 20, 30, 40, 60 years old and have never been married. And that bothers me, because now, people have gotten comfortable. The men are comfortable. The men are scared. Some of them, not all of them.
I'm about to tell you what happened. So, if men are on here, please share, chime in, talk to us. But I want to say real quick, sis, it's not so much that you're wondering why we end up with so many men with men and women with women.
Go there.
Let's talk about that. The biggest issue we have in the church is that we become so traditionalized that you make the word of God of non-effect.
Yes.
We become so holy that we forget that we're still on earth. The Bible tells you first is the natural, after that is the spirit.
Yes.
We have got to learn how to line things up. Now, look at here. Listen to me. I'd have said, look at here. But for real, we have got to understand the difference between tradition, religion, spirituality, and your walk with Christ.
Yes.
Those are all total different conversations. Now, if you put them all in one bag, you're wrong, because we cannot put them all in one bag. Those are several different conversations. You may have a person that may not say that they're Christ-like and they're following Christ, but they believe in God.
Yes.
We may have spiritual people. Just because someone don't believe in the God we believe in don't mean they do not believe. We cannot be so judgmental as a people to where you can't win anyone to listen to you. They do not want to listen to you because you're too traditionalized.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sis.
And I was going to say, and I don't, and God knows I'm ready to tread this water, because I think a lot of times, even in the church, that's where we found a lot of divorces stemming from.
In the church.
Because, like you said, we're so traditional. We ran to the church house and we served our bishops and our pastor more than we served our spouses at home. And a lot of times
that's out of order.
It's out of order. And we weren't having, and we weren't having, if we weren't wanted sex, our spouse wanted sex, and and Paul tells us how to do it.
Yes, he does.
If you're going on a fast, you need to inform your spouse.
You get permission, basically. And
so you don't
listen now. I'm not saying you're submitting up under him to the point he has the rule of authority over you. But if you're doing things in a proper manner, if you're going on a fast to where you're abstaining from things and there's abstinence taking place and you're married, you're doing it incorrectly. You are first to conversate with your spouse and get the okay from that man, because you cannot withhold from him when you're connected to him, and that's supposed to be your spouse. Now, if we are legally separated, if we have decided to not be together and we're moving apart and we're moving forward in life, then that makes sense to not come together and consummate. That makes sense. But if you're still in a live, vibrant marriage and relationship, you are not to withhold.
No.
You open the door and give the enemy room to come in. Who's the enemy, Brandy? Well, let me tell you who the enemy is. It's that dude down the street that keep catching your eye.
Jody.
It's the woman across the street that keep bending over in the flower garden. Come on now, y'all. Hear what we say.
And really, and when we've been, this is good. This thing to turn all together, because it's really because even then, people are not our enemies. I mean, some people may, but sometimes the enemy is our lack of understanding.
That's it.
We perish because of lack of understanding. And so when we don't have the proper understanding to know that we're supposed to be enjoying our spouses, and we know, and I know that was one of the topics we're going to talk about in further shows. It is. But
it's okay, talk about it.
Okay, let's do it. Because even when Steve was paralyzed in the hospital, I didn't have, my sexual, I had to stop because I had nobody he was not there. Right. And the temptations came, but, I had to learn how to process it. So whatever you do, I had to go to the doctors and they had to train us how to, help him in certain areas so that we were able to still enjoy intimacy. Now, we never got around to enjoying intimacy because he was too sick to do it. But I had to relearn. There are things out there. There are avenues that will help us that are healthy within marriage. And when I say healthy, I may step on some toes here, but porn is not healthy because that is a whole different beast. And we can talk about that too, because
we've been going for over an hour.
Man.
So we're gonna have to wrap this up here very soon, because we're gonna have to break this down into 2 segments just to put it on the airway, so that it can. So do us a favor, share, because we went over an hour, and most of the time we stop at 1 hour, but you all are communicating with us, so we want to interact with you. Please post your questions. We'll wrap up here in about the next 10 minutes so that we can get this on the airway. So please go ahead with your conversation.
Yes.
Ask your questions. Now is the time to talk.
Yes.
We're open. This dialogue is needed so that we can take and break down the divorce rate in the church, break down the divorce rate in outside of the church. I mean, this is so needed. Extramarital affairs. I want to say something, and this may offend you, so I ask you to forgive me in advance. Please do. I don't want to offend anyone, but we have to talk about it. We have to stop blaming Sister Mary Worth.
Well,
we have to stop blaming brother protocol,
Yeah.
for the simple fact that you have to deal with your issues within your own home.
Yes.
Extramarital affairs and extra relationships of any kind first starts at home. We have to deal with our issues at home, whether you're in the church, whether you're not in the church. We have to stop blaming outside influences. We have to deal with the inside before we can even deal with the outside.
Yes. And that's so good, because we do. The moment we hear about the other woman, the other man, we want to go, we want to attack them. We want to, crucify them. But you have to go back and say, okay, where did I miss it as a spouse? And I had to go back and deal with some issues myself. Right. I never stepped out on Steve or anything.
Yes.
And I had to deal with me, because there were times I was tempted in the beginning halves of my marriage.
I'm glad it needs to be dealt with. Yes.
Because I had some issues, and and my husband, we were the flip in our marriage, where they say, oh, the man just wants sex all the time and the woman just want to be cuddled. Well, it was vice versa.
Well, let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah,
that's knowing your appetite.
Yes, because I'm like,
knowing your appetite.
Yes.
That's the proper way to put it right now, since we're on the airways.
Yes, but we grown here. We 21 and over.
Much over.
Yes. But we have to be real with it. And because there were times, and it was like, okay, he had the headache. I'm like, I ain't got no headache.
Right. That's right.
We can cuddle afterwards.
That's right.
But we had to, you have to learn your spouse.
That's right.
You have to take time to get to know them and learn their appetite.
See what this is a good part here. That's why we cannot be so quick to become sexually involved in a relationship without getting to know one another. You should know each other on a spiritual level, a financial level, a mental level, a spiritual, a natural, social, economic. You need to understand and learn people on so many levels before you know them just on an intimate level. Because when you cannot have the intimacy, what are you left with?
Yes.
When the intimacy is taken from you, how do you withstand? How do you maintain? How do you stay in this relationship? So you need a deeper foundation, so that when that time comes, because we all go through things in life.
Oh, yes.
So when that time comes, you know how to move forward.
Yes. And not only that, I'm going to say something. This is going to be really transparent.
Okay.
Well, we've been transparent. This is Well Haiti, so we're talking about it.
Yes, we are.
In these next few minutes. But what you said was so key. We have to have something more foundational and sure when we're coming into a marriage. And we have to be so careful, because I know even in the church, especially when you're younger, you're looking forward to marriage because you're thinking about sex. It's like, oh my God, I've been abstaining. Jesus has been helping me. I'm tired of being kept. I'm ready to let loose. And it has to be something more. This is why it's so important to date, to come to the point of courting, so we can get to know the individual.
I'm going to read this right quick.
Yes.
Okay. This is not mine. I do not own the words that I'm about to read to you. But this is a dating versus courting guide. It is not mine. Okay. I do not own the rights to what I'm about to read to you, but it says understanding is the key, right? Dating is casually getting to know a person you may eventually have a romantic relationship with. Now listen to courting. Courting is romantically involved with someone with the intention of marrying. Now, it did not say sex. It just said romantically involved. The next one, dating may or may not end in marriage. Courting ends in marriage the majority of the time. The next thing does not involve parental approval or supervision. That's dating. You're getting no guidance, no advice or anything. And then when it falls apart, okay, now listen to the flip of that. Courting, it involves parental approval or some type of supervision. Somebody else be held accountable to help you from messing up. Talk to someone. You don't know them yet. Next, dating may involve sexual intimacy. This is dating. Courting does not involve sexual intimacy. Dating can be casual and may not involve any deep emotions. Courting, serious and involve deep emotions. Now, I do not own them, but this is true the way they broke that down. We got to come from the surface level and get a little bit deeper.
Yes. And even with that, you have to know that it was so good. Thank you for sharing it.
You're
We're
welcome.
going to find a way to post that to the website so you all will
Yes.
have access to it as well to keep for yourself.
Yes.
But, even then, I had to go back because there were days, when my husband did have the headache, I was pouting. And I was mad because I'm like, Lord, I didn't sign up for this. When I got married to get what I want, when I want, when I want. And the Lord had to deal with me on that.
That's right.
He said, what is that in you?
That's right.
That feel like you have to have this consistently.
Control.
So, yes. And it was control. It was, and then we even have to go, like you said, deal with the root of things.
Yes.
So because a lot of times we jump in marriage because of lust and we call it love. And you have to make sure, because lust is not satisfied even with marriage. It just even explodes even more so because and I had to really go back and have God deal with me and heal me in that area, because I remember explicitly one time God corrected me on something, and can't nobody shut you down like the Lord. But we were at a women's conference and we were talking about men and dating. And I said, oh my God, I said, I just love men. I thank God for men, Jesus. And the Spirit of God convicted me. He said, no, you don't. He said, you don't love men. He said, you hate men. He said, you love them. He said, you love sex. He said, you love the intimate. And that broke me down. And he showed me that because of all the hurt I had experienced and the rejection from men, I had built up a wall within myself that I began to play the men just like I thought they were playing me this was before I was saved.
We
now.
need a discussion on lust versus
love in the future. She meant love.
Yes. We definitely talk about that on the next one, because we're running out of time. But we're going to talk about that. Stay tuned. We're going to dig in. You remember these questions in our next show when we come live. We're going to talk about these things. This is deep. Now I would say this is deep. She said, yes, we need a discussion on love versus lust. You got the right women before you. We don't mind talking about. I don't mind talking to you about anything. I've been in healthcare for too many years. We could talk about any body part you want to discuss. We could talk about any form, any type, any, because without talking about it, people lack the knowledge and they lack the education of it. And that's why a lot of people get so confused when you talk about being pure and abstaining. There's a big difference in being pure and abstaining. There's a big difference in fornication and adultery when you're in a relationship. So there's so many conversations that we need to discuss that we will get the opportunity as long as we're able to continue. Well, Hades. So we're going to talk about these things. These are things we need to discuss. Love versus lust, sex versus addictions, because you may be addicted to sex. And it's not so much that just because you get into a relationship, it's going to curb that appetite.
Not at all.
No, it will not. If you have an addiction of something, you need help. And marrying somebody or getting in a certain type of relationship will not heal or fix an addiction. Sex is a real issue, just like smoking, just like preaching and teaching. All of them can become addicted if we take things out of the proper context. Go ahead, sister. You can close us out here.
And so that was a great segue to wrap up, because we should deal with that. We're going to deal with sex on next whenever
everyone wants to talk about these things, and
because
it's time.
We need to, because we have to be willing, first of all, because that's why people don't come to the church, because we don't deal with issues. We like to sugarcoat and put things under the carpet.
Sugarcoating is lying.
It basically, and it actually denies the reality and the fullness of God. Because God is concerned about our sex life.
He is.
He's concerned about our purity and how we take care of our bodies. So all of that matters to God. So I'm glad that's a great segue, because we want to talk about it. We're going to talk about sexual addiction. Because
pornography.
We have a testimony about that.
We're going to talk about all them things. So stay tuned to the next show for Hades.
We'll see you next time. Thank you for
tuning in. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you so much. Please like, share. Thank you.
From the Christ Our Healer Facebook page and the YouTube channel. Please like she said, follow, subscribe, and share. Somebody else needs this as well too. Please share.
Thank you.
Have a great night.